You ever see a dog do something so brave, it makes you question what real courage looks like? This isn't just another story about a police dog. It's about a German shepherd named Rex, who didn't just protect people. He gave a little girl her voice back. Imagine this: a silent courtroom, a terrified child who couldn't speak, and then a dog walks in. No words, no commands, just presence. And somehow, the truth finally comes out. I've spent years studying stories like this, real ones, from K-9 units, families, and trauma survivors. And every single time it hits me the same way. Dogs don't just save lives, they heal them. So if you've ever looked at your own dog and felt something deeper, that quiet loyalty, that unspoken promise, this story will remind you just how powerful that bond really is. Stay with me till the end, because what happens here isn't just justice. It's proof that love, even from a four-legged hero, can change everything. The courtroom was heavy with the kind of silence that vibrated in the chest more than the ears. It was the silence of tension, of judgment waiting to fall. Dust drifted through beams of white light spilling in from tall, narrow windows, cutting across rows of faces that whispered behind raised hands. Somewhere a chair creaked. A cough broke the stillness. But beneath it all was an invisible current, one of disbelief, weariness, and an unspoken hunger for something resembling justice. At the center of that courtroom, too small for the oak chair that seemed to swallow her whole, sat Emma. 9 years old, pale cheeks, eyes wide like a startled fawn, clutching a worn-out stuffed bunny so tight it seemed strained. Her fingers trembled against the faded fur, as if it were her only lifeline to safety. The air conditioning hummed faintly, but sweat still gathered at her temple. Each breath came out shallow, shaky. Across the room, the man she once called Dad leaned back in his chair with an almost bored expression, his smirk cruel, confident, as though he already knew the outcome. The prosecutor, a woman in her 40s with eyes that had seen too much pain in too many small faces, leaned forward gently. "Emma," she said softly, her voice careful, almost a whisper, "you're safe here. You can just tell us what happened. No one will hurt you anymore." Emma's gaze flicked up, then immediately dropped to the floor. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her body was a statue of fear. The courtroom held its breath, waiting for the smallest sign of courage to emerge. The defense attorney shifted in his seat, his voice cutting through the fragile air like the scrape of metal. "Your Honor," he said, feigning patience, "it's obvious the child isn't ready to testify. She's terrified, confused. We're wasting everyone's time here." He turned slightly toward the jury, lowering his voice just enough to seem casual. "Besides, kids this age, they tend to mix up dreams and memories." A ripple of discomfort moved through the gallery. Someone whispered. The judge, an older man with gray hair and deep lines carved into his forehead, rubbed the bridge of his nose. His eyes softened as he looked at the trembling child. "Miss Emma," he said, his tone steady but kind. "Do you need a moment?" She didn't respond. Only a faint tremor ran through her shoulders. From the second row, a woman gasped quietly. The prosecutor threw her a glance, one of silent warning. This wasn't pity's place, this was the law's arena. But pity was all the room seemed to hold. The accused leaned forward slightly, his cuffs clinking faintly. His voice was low, sneering. "You don't have to be scared, sweetheart," he said, the word sweetheart dripping with venom. Emma flinched. The bunny nearly slipped from her hands. "Mr. Hayes," the judge snapped, You'll remain silent. The man leaned back again, smiling smugly. The damage was already done. The prosecutor's knuckles whitened on the table. Your Honor, please, she pleaded softly. The child's trauma runs deep. She's not uncooperative. She's terrified. The judge sighed. His hand hovered near the gavel, ready to end the session. Perhaps this can resume another day. Before he could finish, a voice rose from the corner of the room. Your Honor. Every head turned. Officer Daniel, standing near the back, straightened his posture. His badge caught the light. Permission to bring in our K9 unit, he said firmly. For a second, silence. Then laughter. A few members of the gallery chuckled. One juror shook his head. Even the defense lawyer couldn't resist smirking. A dog? He muttered under his breath. What are we going to do? Ask it to testify? The judge arched an eyebrow. Officer Daniels, this is a courtroom, not a training field. With all due respect, Your Honor, Daniels said, stepping forward slightly. Our K9 is trained for emotional support in trauma cases. He's calm, disciplined, and familiar with the witness. The prosecutor's eyes widened slightly. Your Honor, if it helps the child communicate, the defense lawyer interjected sharply. This is absurd. A police dog as a therapy animal? You can't just parade a mutt into the courtroom to sway sympathy. Officer Daniels didn't move. His name is Rex, he said quietly. And he's not a mutt. He's the only one she trusts. The room murmured again. Journalists shifted, scribbling notes. Even the judge looked unsettled, not by the idea, but by the conviction in the officer's voice. Emma looked up for the first time in minutes. The faintest flicker of light stirred behind her frightened eyes. The judge hesitated, fingers drumming on the bench. If this is some kind of stunt, officer. It's not, sir, Daniel said. It's hope. Something in the man's tone, steady, respectful, pleading, cut through the skepticism. The judge exhaled, long and slow. Finally, he nodded. Proceed. But if there's a single disruption, the animal leaves immediately. Yes, Your Honor. Daniels gave a brief signal toward the door. The hinges creaked open. For a moment, there was only the sound of footsteps in the corridor. Then a rhythmic click of claws against marble. Heads turned. Through the doorway stepped Rex. A large German shepherd, coat glinting in the muted sunlight, posture proud yet gentle. His amber eyes scanned the room, alert, intelligent. But when he saw Emma, his body language changed instantly. Ears softening, tail low but wagging slowly, as if reassuring her that she was no longer alone. The laughter that had filled the room moments ago vanished like smoke. Emma's eyes widened, her lips trembled, not from fear this time, but recognition. She whispered something too soft for anyone to hear. The prosecutor leaned in, but she didn't repeat it. Her gaze was locked on Rex, and in that instant, the tightness in her shoulders seemed to ease. The dog padded closer, guided by Officer Daniels, and stopped beside the witness stand. He didn't bark, didn't move closer. He simply sat. His presence was steady, grounding. The judge watched in silence. The defense lawyer opened his mouth to object, but closed it again when he saw the girls trembling slow. The air in the room shifted, subtle, but undeniable. The tension didn't vanish, but it transformed. What had been oppressive became heavy with anticipation, as though everyone present felt that something unexplainable was happening right before their eyes. The prosecutor took a slow breath. Emma, she said softly, do you know this dog? A pause. Then, for the first time, Emma nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek. The courtroom, for all its cynicism, held perfectly still. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Rex tilted his head gently, watching her with the unwavering patience of a friend who had waited far too long to be needed again. In that fragile moment, no one dared to speak. The only sound was the quiet rhythm of the dog's breathing, grounding everyone in the room to something beyond law or logic. And in that silence, the kind that carried both grief and grace, Emma's fingers loosened around the stuffed toy. It was the first heartbeat of truth, returning to life. The sound of claws on marble echoed faintly as Rex entered the courtroom. Every step was measured, deliberate, the rhythm of discipline and quiet confidence. Light from the tall windows caught in the sheen of his coat, black and gold fur that rippled with each controlled breath. The air seemed to shift as he crossed the threshold, as if the very atmosphere recognized something sacred had entered. Conversations that had simmered moments ago dissolved into stunned whispers. Why is there a dog here? Is this a joke? What's he supposed to do, testify? But no one laughed for long. Rex didn't bark, didn't rush, didn't even make eye contact with the people staring at him. His gaze remained steady, focused on the small figure in the witness chair. The girl. The trembling, fragile heart of the room, Emma. She had been a motionless statue minutes before, all breath caught inside fear. But now, as her eyes lifted toward the doorway, something changed. Her lips parted, a soundless gasp leaving her. The terror that had frozen her small frame loosened, replaced by disbelief. Recognition dawned in her eyes like dawn through fog. It wasn't fear. It was memory. Her grip on the stuffed bunny eased. For the first time that day, she didn't look at her stepfather. She looked at Rex. Officer Daniels guided the German shepherd forward, his tone calm, his movements respectful, as though introducing royalty. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "this is Rex. He's a certified K-9 officer trained in trauma response." The judge leaned forward, his curiosity now outweighing skepticism. "Trauma response?" "Yes, sir," Daniels replied. "He's worked with victims, children especially, who've experienced violence. His presence helps them find stability." Across the room, the defense lawyer scoffed, his words sharp enough to pierce the delicate calm. "Stability? We're running a court of law, not a therapy session." No one answered him. The sound of Rex's pause filled the room as he approached the witness stand. He stopped just short of Emma's feet. Then, without being commanded, he sat. Perfect posture, eyes forward, tail resting quietly on the floor. No sound came from him, yet his silence spoke louder than any argument made that day. Emma stared at him, trembling lips forming a whisper that barely reached the front row. "Rex." Officer Daniels nodded gently. "That's right, sweetheart. He remembers you." Her breath hitched. For a long moment she simply looked at him, eyes glistening with tears that hadn't yet fallen. Rex didn't move, didn't demand attention. He merely existed beside her, steady, present, a wall of quiet strength between her and the storm. The courtroom that once felt suffocating now seemed to breathe again. The jury exchanged glances, uncertain of what they were witnessing, but unable to look away. Even the judge seemed caught between duty and awe. The defense attorney tried again, voice brittle with sarcasm. "Are we supposed to believe this? Dog will make her talk?" Rex didn't flinch. He simply turned his head slightly, meeting the man's gaze with a calm, unwavering stare. It was not aggression, it was authority. An authority no human could command, but everyone instinctively respected. The defense lawyer fell silent. Emma wiped her cheek, her small hand shaking. She leaned slightly forward, just enough for her knees to almost touch Rex's side. He didn't react. He just stayed still, breathing slow and deep, the rise and fall of his chest syncing with her own shaky breaths until, somehow, hers steadied. Officer Daniels crouched beside the dog, speaking softly so only Emma could hear. "He's here for you. You don't have to talk yet. Just breathe." The words landed like a gentle hand on her shoulder. Emma's shoulders eased, the tension melting inch by inch. From the gallery, someone sniffled quietly. Even the prosecutor, seasoned and stoic, found herself pressing her lips together to hold back emotion. The moment stretched. The entire courtroom became a fragile bubble of stillness. No noise, no movement. Only the connection between a broken child and the creature who refused to leave her side. The judge leaned back slowly, his gavel forgotten. The world outside the courtroom didn't exist. There was only this impossible stillness where fear met loyalty and found peace. Rex turned his head slightly, his ears flicking as he caught the sound of her whisper. "Rex, you came back." And with that, the first tear slipped down Emma's cheek. Her stepfather, sitting across the room, stiffened. The shift in her expression, the way terror had melted into trust, was undeniable. His confidence faltered, just slightly, but enough for the jury to notice. The prosecutor seized the moment, her voice low and tender. "Emma, it's okay. You can look at him if you need to. You're safe now." The girl nodded faintly. Her eyes didn't leave Rex. She reached out a trembling hand, hesitant at first, hovering above his head. Rex waited. Then, with the gentlest motion, he lowered his head until her small fingers brushed his fur. It was the lightest touch, soft as a prayer, but it cracked something open inside her. Her breath hitched, then steadied. The sound that escaped her lips wasn't a sob or a word, but a sigh, like the air leaving a wound that had been closed for too long. Rex exhaled softly in return, a subtle huff through his nose. He leaned slightly forward, resting his chin near her feet, still without command, as if silently telling her, "You're not alone." Tears pooled in her eyes, spilling freely now, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of recognition, of safety rediscovered. No one dared interrupt. The laughter from earlier felt shameful now, like echoes from another world. The room's cynicism dissolved into reverence. Even the judge, stoic, skeptical, found himself swallowing against the lump in his throat. He looked toward the prosecutor and nodded slightly, a silent permission to continue. The prosecutor didn't push. She knew this wasn't the time for questions or statements. The truth was not ready to speak yet, but it was waking. She looked at Rex, then back at the girl. "You remember him," she said softly. "He helped you once, didn't he?" Emma nodded again, a tear sliding down her cheek, her voice almost imperceptible. "He saved me." The words were barely more than breath, yet they fell into the silence like thunder. The gallery stirred. A few gasps broke the air, quickly silenced by the weight of the moment. Rex lifted his head slightly, alert again, but not tense. His eyes flicked briefly toward the accused man, then back to Emma. The movement was subtle but clear, protective, instinctive. And for the first time since the trial began, everyone in that courtroom understood something profound. This wasn't just a dog. He was a witness in his own way, silent, loyal, and unshakably truthful. The judge finally broke the silence, his voice softer now, stripped of its earlier skepticism. "Let the record show," he said quietly, "that the witness may remain accompanied by the K-9 for the duration of her testimony." A murmur spread through the crowd, but no one protested, not even the defense. Emma looked down at Rex again. She brushed her fingers through his fur, whispering to herself, "It's okay now." And though no one could hear it but her, the dog's eyes seemed to answer, "Yes, it is." In that instant, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted entirely. The walls no longer felt like barriers. The light no longer seemed harsh. The silence no longer suffocated. It soothed. What had begun as a spectacle had become something sacred. And in that stillness, that single unspoken connection between a wounded child and her guardian, the first heartbeat of truth began to pulse, slow, steady, alive once more. The morning air carried the familiar hum of suburban life, sprinklers ticking across lawns, birds scattered on telephone wires, the distant bark of a restless dog somewhere down the block. Patrol routes like this were ordinary, almost quiet to the point of monotony. But for Officer Daniels, it was the kind of peace he didn't take for granted. His partner trotted beside him. The rhythmic click of claws on pavement, the soft jingle of a collar tag that read Rex. Rex walked with purpose, head held high, nose twitching to every passing scent. A squirrel here, a patch of dew-damp grass there. Daniels smiled faintly. "You love this neighborhood, huh, buddy?" Rex looked up briefly, tail wagging once before returning to his steady gait. Their daily patrol often took them down Maple Avenue, a quiet street lined with pastel houses and trimmed hedges, and it was always at house number 43, a pale blue one with flower boxes on the windows, where Rex would slow down. Because from behind that white picket fence came a sound that made his ears perk, the sound of laughter. High, bright, unguarded. The first time it happened, Daniels hadn't thought much of it. A child's laughter, the joy of summer afternoons, nothing unusual. But Rex had stopped, sitting abruptly in front of the fence as if he'd found something worth guarding. Then a little girl appeared. Emma. Barefoot on the porch, her hair tangled by the breeze, holding a bubble wand in one hand and a cup of soapy water in the other. When she saw the large German shepherd, her eyes lit up with curiosity instead of fear. "Wow," she whispered, kneeling by the fence. "You're huge." "Time bomb feast chums." Rex tilted his head, ears flicking forward. Daniels gave a small chuckle. "He's friendly, don't worry. His name's Rex. He's with the police." Emma gasped in delight. "A police dog?" Her tone carried the awe of discovery. "Can he arrest bad guys?" "Only if they don't give him treats first," Daniels said with a grin. She giggled, a sound that made Rex's tail thump against the ground. She reached through the slats of the fence, palm open. Rex sniffed, then licked her fingertips, earning another peal of laughter. And that was how it began. From that day, every morning patrol ended with a brief stop at house number 43. Emma would be waiting by the fence, her hair tied in a loose ponytail, clutching some offering. A biscuit, a rubber ball, sometimes just a handful of grass she thought he might like. Rex would wag his tail furiously, the kind of joy he reserved only for her. Daniels noticed how his partner's posture softened in her presence, how his alertness melted into something tender and almost human. She called him her secret friend, because, as she whispered one day with a mischievous grin, "Mom says I'm not supposed to talk to strangers through the fence. But you're not a stranger, are you, Rex?" Rex barked once softly, as if answering. Days blurred into weeks. Their small ritual continued, Rex sitting, Emma talking. She told him about her drawings, her favorite songs, how she dreamed of being a police officer. But only if Rex was her partner. Daniels would smile, sometimes jotting notes on his patrol sheet while pretending not to listen. But then, one morning, the street was quiet. No laughter. No soft footsteps running down the porch. House number 43 looked different. The blinds were drawn. The flowers in the window boxes had begun to wilt. Daniels frowned, but kept walking. Maybe they were out. Maybe she was sick. The next day, still silence. And the day after that. Rex slowed again, his ears twitching toward the fence. He let out a soft whine. Daniels tugged the leash gently. Come on, pal. We've got other stops. But Rex didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on the house, the closed curtains, the stillness. He sniffed the air, then the ground near the gate. Something unsettled him. Daniels crouched beside him. What is it, boy? Rex's nose pressed to the bottom of the gate, inhaling, exhaling sharply. Then, with a low rumble in his throat, he began to scratch, steady, insistent. His nails scraped against the wood, the sound raw and desperate. Rex, Daniel said, more firmly now, tugging the leash again. Leave it. Let's go. But Rex wouldn't stop. His body was rigid, tail lowered, eyes locked on the still house. Something deep inside him knew. Something was wrong. Daniels finally pulled him back with a sigh. Come on, boy. That's not our business. The words left his mouth heavier than he meant them to. He'd seen enough in his years on the force to recognize when instinct was trying to speak. But instinct wasn't evidence. And evidence was the only thing that mattered. Still, as they walked away, Daniels kept glancing back over his shoulder. That night, Rex couldn't rest. Daniels had just turned off the lights when the dog began pacing by the window, nails tapping on the hardwood floor. His breathing was fast, ears flicking toward distant sounds no one else could hear. Time 400 mouseums. Easy, boy, Daniels murmured from his chair. Go to sleep. It's late. But Rex padded to the window, sitting upright. His gaze was fixed toward the direction of Maple Avenue, where somewhere beyond the darkness lay a quiet blue house with closed blinds. He whined, low, mournful. Daniels frowned, watching. You really liked that kid, huh? Rex didn't respond, of course, but the answer was there, in the soft tilt of his head, the way his eyes refused to leave the night. Minutes passed. The room stayed dark except for the faint orange glow from a street lamp outside. And then, without warning, Rex lifted his head and howled. It wasn't a loud, wild cry. It was deep, almost human. A sound that seemed to carry grief, confusion, and something that felt like love. Daniels froze, heart heavy. The sound echoed down the street, slipping through open windows, brushing against the night like a plea. Across town, behind a shuttered window at house number 43, a small girl stirred in her bed. Eyes wide, heart racing. She recognized the sound, the one that used to greet her each morning with joy. Now, it came like a memory wrapped in sorrow. And though no one else could hear the language in that cry, Rex's message was clear. He was calling out for someone he could no longer see. The laughter that had vanished, the innocence he didn't understand, was being taken away. Daniels sat beside him, resting a hand on the dog's back. We'll check on her soon, he whispered, though he didn't know if he meant it. Rex didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the horizon, where shadows swallowed the pale blue house. Time was 600 pounds. The night went quiet again, but somewhere in that silence, the storm had already begun. The storm came without warning. It wasn't thunder or lightning that split the night, but shouting, sharp, violent, the kind that slices through the dark and wakes even the deepest sleepers. Neighbors stepped out onto porches in their nightclothes, glancing toward the pale blue house at the end of Maple Avenue. Curtains fluttered. Lights flicked on. And then came the unmistakable sound, a child's cry, muffled and desperate. Someone called 911. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens rose, swelling louder until red and blue light washed over the quiet street. The once peaceful neighborhood now throbbed with urgency. Officer Daniels pulled the patrol car up against the curb, gravel crunching under the tires. Rex was already alert before the engine stopped, ears erect, eyes glowing in the flash of emergency lights. His body quivered, not from fear, but recognition. Daniels opened the door. "Stay close, boy." But Rex didn't wait. The moment the door clicked, he leapt out, nose to the ground, pulling hard against the leash toward the house number 43. The gate was half open, swinging on one hinge. A woman, a neighbor, stood nearby, shaking. "It's them," she whispered hoarsely. "The man was yelling again. I heard things breaking, and then silence." Daniels nodded quickly. "Stay back, ma'am." He motioned to the other officers arriving behind him. The team fanned out, flashlights cutting through the darkness. From inside the house came no sound now. No voices, no movement. Only the creak of the old porch beneath their boots. Daniels knocked hard. "Police, open up!" Nothing. "Doors locked," one officer muttered. Daniels nodded once. "Breach it." The door splintered with a loud crack, the echo of wood against metal filling the night. The team moved in, weapons raised, lights sweeping through the small living room, overturned furniture, shards of glass glittering on the floor, a broken picture frame face down. Rex pulled forward, growling low. He sniffed, circling near the hallway, then darted toward the stairs. Daniels followed close behind, trusting his partner's instincts. "Clear the downstairs," Daniels ordered. "I'll follow the dog." They moved through the dim light, the smell of fear thick in the air, a smell Rex knew all too well. He paused at a closed bedroom door. Scratched paint. Something soft, rhythmic, sobbing. Rex whined, pressing his nose to the crack. Daniels pushed the door open slowly, flashlight sweeping the small, shadowed room. Clothes strewn across the floor, a chair tipped over, a small lamp still flickering weakly. Then Rex stopped at a closet door and began pawing frantically. Daniels lowered himself, voice gentle now. "Hello, is someone there?" No answer. Only shallow breaths from inside. He reached for the handle and opened the door. There, in the narrow dark space, was Emma. Her knees were pulled tight to her chest, arms wrapped around her legs, face streaked with tears and dirt. The stuffed bunny she once held was gone. A bruise bloomed along her cheek, another on her arm. When the light hit her eyes, she flinched. Daniels froze for a moment, his throat tightening. Then, slowly, he knelt down. "Hey, sweetheart. You're safe now." Rex moved before Daniels could stop him, lowering himself onto his belly, crawling the last few inches forward, silent and calm. His nose brushed the air gently near her hand. Emma's breathing hitched. Her tearful eyes flicked toward the shadowed figure of the German shepherd, and then widened. "Rex?" The sound of her whisper was small, fragile, like glass about to break. Rex gave a low whine, his tail thumping softly once against the floor. He didn't rush her, didn't bark. He simply lay there, his body angled between her and the rest of the room, a living barrier against the world that had hurt her. Her trembling hands lifted, hesitating, then found his fur. The moment her fingers sank into his coat, she collapsed against him, her face burying into his neck. A sob tore through the air. Daniel swallowed hard, stepping back. The other officers stood silent in the doorway. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Not even the radios crackled. All that existed in that room was the quiet sound of a child crying into a dog's fur. When paramedics entered, their boots thudded softly on the floorboards. One knelt beside Daniel's, whispering, "We'll take her to the hospital. She's hurt, but conscious." Daniels nodded numbly. His eyes stayed on Rex. The medic reached out carefully toward the girl. "Sweetheart, can you come with me?" Emma clutched Rex tighter. "No," she murmured, her voice breaking. "Don't take him away, please." Rex didn't move. His head remained low beside her, his breath steady and deep, the warmth of his body anchoring her to safety. Time what 500 patterns. Daniels crouched beside them. "Hey, it's okay. He's not going anywhere, all right? He'll stay right here." Her small hand fisted in Rex's fur. "Promise?" Daniels nodded. "Promise." The medic looked at Daniels, whispering under his breath, "She won't let go." Daniels exhaled slowly, eyes soft. He's the only one she trusts. As the officers led the handcuffed man down the hallway, his curses echoing in protest, Rex lifted his head. His eyes tracked the man, body tense but unmoving. Only when the door slammed shut behind them did he relax again. The room seemed quieter now, as if exhaling relief. Daniels reached out and rubbed behind Rex's ear. "Good boy," he whispered. Outside, the night was still humming. Neighbors gathered in whispers, lights glowing in windows. But inside, beneath the harsh glare of police flashlights, a small miracle had unfolded. Emma sat wrapped in a blanket now, Rex beside her like a sentry carved from shadow and devotion. Every time she trembled, his body pressed closer until her breathing steadied. One of the officers paused to take a photo for documentation. Standard procedure. The click of the camera captured it. The little girl's tear-streaked face buried against the thick fur of a German shepherd, her hand gripping him as if he were the only solid thing left in her world. That image, unposed, unplanned, would stay with everyone who saw it. A symbol of something deeper than law or justice. The image of innocence, shielded by loyalty. As the paramedics gently lifted Emma to the stretcher, Rex followed, his steps slow, refusing to be pulled away. Daniels placed a hand on his harness. "It's okay, buddy. You did your job. Time 400 PEMs. But Rex kept his eyes on the girl, watching as she disappeared into the flashing lights outside. Daniels stood in the doorway for a long moment, heart heavy. He knew he'd seen many things in his career. Arrests, rescues, loss. But nothing like this. Because tonight, he realized something he'd never admit out loud. The dog had reached her in a way no human could. Rex had found her in the dark and brought her back to the light. And as the ambulance pulled away, its siren fading into the distance, the street returned to silence. But it was no longer the peaceful silence of before. It was the silence after a storm, the kind that leaves the air thick with memory, and hearts forever changed. Morning light slanted through the courthouse windows, drawing pale streaks across the polished floor. It should have been an ordinary day in court. Motions filed, testimony heard, verdicts delayed. But this morning was different. Today, the courtroom was full, and the air buzzed with something between disbelief and curiosity. At the front, the small figure of Emma sat in the witness chair again, feet barely reaching the floor. Beside her, motionless yet quietly powerful, was Rex, his coat gleaming under the light, eyes fixed, body poised in a silent watch. A low hum rippled through the gallery. Some came to see justice, others just to witness the oddity of it. A dog allowed to sit in court. The idea alone seemed ridiculous to some, even offensive to others. But there was something in the air, a tension too delicate to mock outright. Still, it didn't stop the defense from trying. The defense attorney, slick suit and smoother tongue, leaned back in his chair, lips curled into a half smile. "Your Honor," he began, voice heavy with irony, "I must commend the prosecution for this creative display. Truly. Are we putting the dog on the stand next?" A few chuckles slipped from the gallery. Even one of the jurors smiled faintly before catching himself. The prosecutor stiffened. "This K-9 officer is here as emotional support," she said firmly. "The witness is a child, and this is a valid trauma accommodation recognized by—" The defense lawyer waved a hand dismissively. Yes, the Emotional Support Act. But surely, Your Honor, we can't let a dog influence testimony. What's next? A cat cross-examining my client?" Laughter rolled through the room again. Uneasy, but real. Time by Moss. From his seat, the accused, Mr. Hayes, smirked. His cuffed hands rested loosely in his lap, but his eyes were sharp, cold. He seemed to enjoy the spectacle, the whispers, the attention. The judge, tired and visibly strained, tapped the gavel lightly. "That's enough. The court will maintain order." But even his voice carried hesitation. The sight before him, a child beside a K-9, both staring toward the same man, was unprecedented. Then he turned to Emma. "Young lady," he said, his tone softening, "do you feel comfortable continuing?" Emma didn't answer right away. Her shoulders were tense, breath shallow. Her hand twitched near Rex's back but didn't quite touch him yet. Rex sat perfectly still. Not a sound escaped him. No bark, no whine, not even a movement. Only his steady breathing filled the tiny space between them. Then Emma exhaled. Her trembling began to ease. The prosecutor took a small step closer. "Emma," she said gently, "do you remember what we talked about? You can tell the truth, and Rex will stay right here with you." Emma's eyes flickered to the dog. Slowly, she reached out, fingers brushing his ear. The same ear she used to tug playfully through the fence long ago. His fur was warm under her touch. Steady. Real. Her breathing steadied with every heartbeat. And then, in a voice cracked but certain, she spoke. "He was there." The words were barely audible, but they cut through the courtroom like a blade. The prosecutor leaned forward. "Who was, Emma?" Her eyes flicked toward the defense table, toward the man who now sat with his chin high, feigning boredom. "The man sitting there," she whispered. "He hurt me." A rustle of sound spread through the room. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Oh, God." The defense lawyer quickly stood, voice rising. "Objection, Your Honor. Leading question, emotional manipulation." But the judge's gavel struck the block sharply. "Sit down, counselor." Emma's small fingers gripped Rex's ear again. Her voice trembled but grew steadier. "He hurt me, and he hurt Rex too." The world stopped. All sound died at once. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to vanish. The laughter that had filled the courtroom moments ago evaporated like mist. Rex lifted his head slightly, his gaze locking onto the man in the defendant's chair. The movement was slow, deliberate. His ears twitched, His chest expanded in one deep, controlled breath. Across the room, Hayes's smirk faltered. His fingers clenched. His posture shifted ever so slightly. A flicker of something, guilt, fear, flashing behind his eyes. The prosecutor spoke softly, her tone almost reverent. "Emma, are you sure?" The girl nodded. Her eyes didn't waver. "He kicked Rex when he barked. He said he'd make sure nobody believed me." The murmur that followed was no longer amusement. It was shock. Pure, cold shock. The defense attorney's face drained of color. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. There's no record, no evidence of any dog involved in—" "Enough," the judge said, voice low but firm. "Let her finish." Emma's chin lifted, a small, trembling act of courage. "Rex barked that night. He tried to stop him, but he—" Her voice broke. "Time 400 mounds." She looked down, pressing her face into the dog's shoulder. "He hurt him too." Rex didn't move, but his tail flicked once. Not from happiness, but restraint. His eyes never left the accused. It was as though he remembered too. Officer Daniels, standing at the back of the courtroom, felt his throat tighten. He remembered that night. The broken door, the bruised child, the trembling dog who refused to leave her side. And now, here they were, back where justice was supposed to live. The silence stretched so long that even the journalists forgot to write. Finally, the judge spoke, his voice hushed but resolute. "The record will reflect the witness's statement. And this court," he added, glancing sternly at the defense, "will maintain respect for the gravity of what's being said." No one dared laugh again. The accused stared at the girl, but for once there was no arrogance in his eyes. Only the faint trace of something that looked like fear. Emma's shoulders trembled, but she didn't look away. Her small hand still rested on Rex's ear, her fingers buried in his fur like roots in the earth. And Rex, patient, unblinking, unshakable, stayed exactly where he was, his very stillness declaring a truth that no cross-examination could undo. For a long, suspended moment, the courtroom existed in perfect silence, a silence that felt alive, breathing, pulsing with everything unspoken. Then the judge exhaled, slow and heavy. He looked toward the child, toward the dog, then back at the accused. "This court," he said quietly, "has heard enough laughter for one day." His gavel struck once, sharp, final, and the sound echoed like thunder through the halls. No one moved. No one dared. Because in that instant, it was no longer a courtroom. It was a reckoning. For a long heartbeat, the courtroom hung in silence. The kind of silence that weighs more than sound. Every eye was fixed on the child and the dog, as if both were suspended in some fragile, sacred moment. The tension was so thick, it felt as though one wrong breath could shatter it. Then Emma's small shoulders began to shake. At first, it was silent, trembling. The kind of tears that build up inside for too long. The kind that don't make a sound. But then, the dam broke. A choked sob tore through the quiet. It was raw, unfiltered. The cry of a child who had carried fear inside her body for far too long. Her face crumpled, hands clutching Rex's fur as if to keep from falling apart entirely. "He hurt me," she gasped, voice trembling through the tears. "He hurt Rex too." And that's when Rex moved. The German shepherd, so calm until now, suddenly rose to his feet. His movement was fluid, instinctive. The muscles along his back rippled, his tail lowered, and he stepped forward. Not aggressively, but with the clear purpose of a guardian reclaiming his ground. Then came the sound, a single bark. Sharp, clear, echoing off the marble walls like a crack of thunder, the kind of bark that silenced even those who had mocked him before. It wasn't anger. It was declaration, the living sound of truth. Emma startled, then immediately steadied when Rex's body shielded her. He stood directly between her and the accused man, every line of his frame radiating protection. His gaze locked onto the man in the defendant's chair, unwavering, cold, ancient in its loyalty. The accused, Mr. Hayes, flinched. For the first time since the trial began, the mask slipped. His smirk faltered, his shoulders twitched back as though the dog's eyes were a mirror showing him what he really was. The room erupted in murmurs, reporters whispering, the defense attorney shouting for order, the prosecutor frozen mid-breath. "Your Honor," the defense lawyer barked, irony forgotten. "Control that animal." But the judge didn't answer right away. His eyes were wide, reflecting something closer to awe than fear. "Order," he began weakly, his voice cracking. "Order in the court." His gavel struck the bench once, twice, but even he couldn't steady his tone, because no one could mistake what had just happened. This wasn't chaos. This was instinct. This was justice rising in the form it understood best. Loyalty defending innocence. Officer Daniels stepped forward quickly, one hand raised in calm reassurance. His other hand rested on Rex's leash, firm but gentle. "He's just doing his job, sir," he said quietly, his voice carrying through the room like calm through a storm. "He's protecting his witness." The judge swallowed hard, lowering his gavel. He nodded slowly. "I see that." The defense attorney's words faltered before they left his mouth. Every argument he'd prepared suddenly felt small, fragile and meaningless against the living truth standing in front of him. Emma clung to Rex, burying her face into his fur. "He always protected me," she whispered, her voice cracking. That single line, soft, trembling, honest, rolled through the courtroom like a wave. A few jurors shifted in their seats, some wiping at their eyes. Even one of the clerks, stoic as stone until now, looked away, blinking hard. The prosecutor placed a hand over her chest. She'd seen victims before. She'd seen pain, testimony, tears. But this was different. This was the kind of truth that doesn't need translation. The kind that everyone, no matter how skeptical, could feel. Rex remained still, a statue of vigilance. His ears of poisons were pricked, eyes sharp, chest rising and falling with slow control. He wasn't snarling, he wasn't threatening, he was simply present, the embodiment of loyalty itself. The judge leaned forward, speaking softly but clearly. "Officer Daniels, is this typical behavior for your unit?" Daniels shook his head, lips tight but proud. "No, Your Honor. He's never done that before." The judge nodded, eyes flicking to Emma. "And yet, I believe we've just seen something more powerful than testimony." The defense attorney tried to recover, but his voice quivered. "Your Honor, we can't let a dog dictate." The judge raised his hand. "Counselor, that dog isn't dictating anything. He's reacting to something your client provoked." All eyes turned again toward the accused. Hayes sat stiffly now, eyes darting between the judge and the dog. The sweat at his temple gleamed under the harsh lights. He shifted in his chair, trying to reclaim his composure, but his jaw clenched hard enough to twitch. The jury saw it. The prosecutor saw it. And most importantly, Emma saw it too. Her crying had softened to quiet hiccups now, her face still pressed against Rex's shoulder. She didn't have to say more. Her silence said everything. Daniels crouched beside the pair, whispering gently, "You're okay now, sweetheart. He's not gonna hurt you again." Emma nodded weakly, one small hand still gripping Rex's collar. The judge looked around the room, then took a long breath before speaking. "Let it be noted," he said gravely, "that the witness has identified the accused, and that the K-9 officer's reaction corresponds with the child's emotional distress." He paused, his tone dropping lower. "Sometimes," he said, almost to himself, "justice has more than one voice." No one argued, not even the defense. The courtroom sat in stillness again, but this time, it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of respect. The air itself seemed to shift, less hostile now, almost reverent. For the first time since this trial began, Emma no longer looked like a victim. She looked like a survivor, and Rex, standing beside her, looked like everything a protector was meant to be. The defense lawyer lowered his eyes. The prosecutor's shoulders dropped with quiet relief. Even the spectators who had once laughed now looked at the child with something close to shame and gratitude. The judge adjusted his glasses, his voice gentler now. "Let's proceed," he said quietly. "But let it be known that what we witnessed today was not disorder. It was courage." Rex's ears flicked, as if he understood. Emma looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "We did it, didn't we?" Rex didn't answer, but his tail gave one slow, calm wag. And as the moment settled over the room, a quiet truth crystallized in every heart present. Once truth awakens, no lie, no laughter, no denial can silence it again. The storm had broken, not outside, but inside that quiet, echoing courtroom. What began as a trembling whisper had become something unstoppable. Truth, once fragile, now rising like a tide. Emma sat in the witness chair, the same one that had dwarfed her days ago. But she was different now. Her face was pale, yes, her hands still small and shaking, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear this time, but resolve. The kind that comes from knowing that someone, something, would never let her face the darkness alone. Beside her, Rex lay silent and still, his chest moving in slow rhythm. His tail rested against the floor like a heartbeat made visible. Whenever Emma faltered, his ear twitched, just slightly, as if reminding her he was there. The prosecutor stood a few feet away, voice gentle, tone stripped of all formality. She wasn't interrogating. She was guiding. Like a mother helping a child find the words for a story that should never have had to be told. "It's okay, Emma," she said softly. "Take your time. Can you tell us what happened that night?" Emma swallowed hard, eyes darting once toward the man sitting across from her, the one who had stolen her laughter and replaced it with silence. Her body tensed, but Rex shifted, a low, steady breath escaping him, his presence grounding her like a hand on her shoulder. Her small fingers found his fur again. She inhaled, and then she began. "It was loud," she whispered. "I remember. I was in my room, and he was yelling. I tried to make it stop by covering my ears." Her voice broke, and for a moment, the only sound was her breathing. The courtroom leaned in. No one dared to move, not even the scribbling reporters. "I called for Mom," she continued, the words trembling but pushing forward. "But she didn't come. Then I heard something break, and he came upstairs." Her eyes flicked toward Rex again, as if to draw strength. "He was angry. He smelled like beer. He said it was my fault she left." The judge lowered his gaze. One of the jurors wiped at her eyes. "I hid in the closet," Emma said softly. "I tried to stay quiet, but he found me. He pulled me out and yelled. I remember falling. I don't remember how many times." A soft sob escaped her lips. The prosecutor stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. "You're doing great, Emma. You're very brave. What happened next?" She hesitated. Then, suddenly, a light flickered in her eyes. "Rex," she said. Her voice strengthened as she spoke his name. "I heard him. I heard him barking outside. He wouldn't stop. He was loud, like he was trying to tell someone. He scratched the door so hard I thought he'd break it. And that made him angrier." Her small hands clenched into fists in her lap. "He went outside to stop Rex. He kicked him. I saw it through the window. He kicked him hard, and Rex still didn't stop barking." The dog's head lifted slightly at the sound of his name. The room watched him, a silent witness who didn't need words. Emma's breathing hitched, but she pressed on, her words now flowing faster, as though the dam had truly broken. "When the police came, I was in the closet again. I thought it was him coming back, but it wasn't. I saw the light, and then Rex found me. He came to me first." Tears slid down her face now, one after another, but she didn't stop. "I remember his nose," she whispered, voice cracking. "He just found me. I didn't even say anything. He just knew where I was. And when I saw him, I knew I was safe. He was hurt, but he stayed with me." The prosecutor took a deep breath, steadying her own trembling voice. "Did Rex help you feel safe again, Emma?" The girl nodded, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. "He's the only one who could make it stop shaking inside my head." A low murmur filled the courtroom. Not noise, not words, just emotion. Some people were crying quietly. Others sat frozen, afraid that even breathing too loudly would break the moment. The judge removed his glasses, placing them slowly on the desk before him. His face was drawn, his jaw tight. He rubbed the bridge of his nose, eyes glistening with something he would never call tears. Officer Daniels stood at the back, his hands clasped in front of him, staring at the dog that had been his partner for years, now realizing that Rex had been more than that all along. "Your Honor," the defense attorney began quietly, rising to his feet. "This is—" But the judge raised his hand sharply. "Sit down, counselor." His voice was quiet, but final. Emma looked down again, her fingers still tangled in Rex's fur. "He saved me," she whispered. "Even when he was hurt, he came back. He barked so the police would come. I know he did. He's the reason they found me." The accused man, once smug, once untouchable, shifted uneasily. Sweat beaded at his temple. His jaw worked, clenching and unclenching as if struggling to keep control of himself. "Is that true?" the prosecutor asked, her tone steady but firm. "Did Rex save you that night?" Emma nodded again, tears dripping onto her lap. "Yes, he saved me." The words hung in the air like a vow. Across the courtroom, Hayes's composure began to crack. His breathing grew heavier, his eyes darted downward, his fingers twitching against the table. Everyone saw it. The guilt wasn't shouted. It was visible. It lived in the way his body recoiled from the truth he'd tried to bury. Daniels watched him, quiet and still. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The truth had taken its shape already, and it looked nothing like the man in the defendant's chair. The prosecutor stepped back, her eyes never leaving the child. "Thank you, Emma," she said softly. "You did something very brave today." Emma looked at Rex, and for a heartbeat, the smallest smile broke through her tears. She leaned closer, whispering into his fur, "We did it." Rex closed his eyes briefly, his head tilting toward her hand. And as that small, fragile moment filled the room, even the harsh fluorescent lights seemed softer, as if the very air had chosen to listen. The judge exhaled deeply, voice rough when he finally spoke. "Let the record show that the witness has given her full testimony." He paused, his hand trembling slightly as he put his glasses back on. "And let it also show that this court will not soon forget what we have witnessed today." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of empathy, full of sorrow, full of awe. And in that silence, the accused's mask broke completely. He slumped forward, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking, not with anger, but with the weight of his own unraveling. The truth, at last, had done its work. It had flooded the room, unstoppable, undeniable, and washed away every lie that once dared to stand in its way. The courtroom was still, thick with the kind of silence that feels alive, the breathless waiting that comes before something irreversible. The jury had been gone for hours, but now they were returning, a dozen solemn faces carrying the weight of truth. Emma sat quietly beside Rex, her small hand resting on his back. The courtroom lights were harsh, but the child's focus was soft. She wasn't looking at the jury, or the accused, or even the judge. She was looking at Rex. He was calm, eyes half closed, his breathing steady. The faintest rumble of a sigh escaped him, the kind dogs make when they're content, or when they know they've done what they were meant to do. Officer Daniels stood a few paces behind, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on his partner. The prosecutor stood near the bench, posture taut with quiet anticipation. Across the room, the defense lawyer sat stiffly, pale and defeated, and the accused, Mr. Hayes, was a shell of the man who had entered this courtroom with arrogance. His hands shook slightly on the table. His once cocky eyes now avoided everyone's gaze. The bailiff called for order, and the judge nodded. "Bring in the jury." The shuffle of shoes echoed like thunder in the silence. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her fingers unconsciously curling into Rex's fur. He shifted slightly, pressing his shoulder closer against her leg. A silent reassurance. She looked down at him and whispered, "It's okay, boy. We did our best." The jury foreman rose, a middle-aged man with weary eyes and a voice steady but thick with emotion. "Your Honor," he said, glancing toward Emma before looking back down at the paper in his hand. "We have reached a verdict." The judge nodded. "Please read it." Time seemed to slow. Every breath in the room synced, drawn in together, held tight. The foreman's voice wavered just once before finding its strength. "On the charge of aggravated assault and child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty." The word struck the room like a bell, sharp, pure, undeniable. There was no outburst, no chaos, only the sound of muffled sobs, quiet gasps, and the faint rustle of tissues. Some of the jurors had tears in their eyes. The prosecutor bowed her head, whispering something that sounded like "thank you." Then, slowly, a soft ripple of applause began. Hesitant at first, restrained by the gravity of the place, but growing as emotion broke through decorum. The judge didn't stop it. He simply sat back, his eyes distant but bright, as if the applause wasn't for the system, but for something deeper. for courage itself. Emma didn't clap. She didn't speak. She just turned to Rex, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. He looked up at her, ears tilting forward, eyes dark and kind. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. Her body shook with quiet sobs, but there was relief in them, the kind that tastes like freedom. Rex didn't move. He didn't lick her or wag his tail. He just stood still, absorbing her tears like a guardian made of flesh and loyalty. The judge leaned forward, clearing his throat. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. This court has witnessed many things over the years: anger, pain, injustice. But rarely have we seen such quiet courage. He paused, his gaze landing on Emma, then drifting to the dog beside her. Sometimes, he continued softly, courage speaks through those who cannot speak for themselves. And sometimes, it has fur and 4 legs, and a heart far truer than most men's. A hush followed his words, the kind of silence that feels sacred. Officer Daniels blinked back, the moisture gathering in his eyes. He crouched down beside Rex, resting a hand gently on the dog's shoulder. His voice came out rough but proud. "Good boy," he whispered. "You did it, partner." Rex's ears twitched, and for a fleeting second, his tail brushed against the officer's hand. Acknowledgement enough. Across the room, the bailiff escorted Hayes out, his head bowed, his footsteps hollow. He didn't look back. The chains on his wrists clinked faintly, each sound fading into the distance. No one celebrated his fall. They were too busy witnessing something purer, redemption, not of the law, but of the human spirit. Emma wiped her cheeks, turning her eyes to the judge. He gave her a gentle nod, no longer as an official, but as a man acknowledging something greater than his own authority. "You were very brave," he said softly. She nodded, whispering back, "I wasn't brave alone." The judge's gaze softened. "No, you weren't." Daniels helped Emma down from the chair, keeping a steady hand on her shoulder. The little girl turned once more to Rex, kneeling beside him. Her fingers brushed over the badge clipped to his harness, the same one that gleamed under the harsh lights like a medal of honor. "He's my hero," she said quietly, her voice barely carrying across the room. Rex looked at her, his head tilting slightly, eyes filled with the kind of wisdom no human could define. Then, as if understanding every word, he lowered his head onto her lap. The gesture was small, a movement so ordinary it could have been missed, but it broke what little composure anyone had left. The prosecutor looked away, wiping tears from her eyes. One of the jurors covered her mouth. Even the bailiff, stoic and cold through years of court sessions, turned slightly to the side. In that one moment, that image of a trembling girl and a dog resting his head in quiet devotion, every label, every legal title, every formality dissolved. There were no victims, no officers, no prosecutors. There were just souls, human and animal, bound by love that had faced darkness and survived. Daniels placed a hand over Rex's head, his voice low and steady. "You've done enough for today, buddy." Rex didn't move. He stayed right where he was, eyes closed, his breathing syncing with the little girl's. The courtroom lights caught the faint shimmer of tears on Emma's cheek and the shine of his fur beneath her hand. The applause quieted. The murmurs faded, and all that remained was stillness, soft, peaceful, sacred, the kind of silence that follows when justice has finally spoken, not through words, but through compassion. The seasons had turned quietly, and with them, time. A year had passed since the trial. since the world learned that truth could be spoken not through words, but through loyalty and love wrapped in fur. Outside, autumn returned to the city, Maple Avenue glowing with rust and gold. Inside a small counseling center, Emma sat cross-legged on a rug, crayons scattered around her. She was different now, not unscarred, but no longer trapped. Her eyes were brighter, her laughter less afraid. "What are you drawing today, sweetheart?" her therapist asked. Emma held up a page showing a pair of brown eyes and a blue collar. "It's Rex," she said, "my hero." From the hallway came a familiar sound, claws clicking on tile. Emma's head lifted, her face lighting up. "He's here!" The door opened, and Rex entered, older but steady. His amber eyes found hers instantly. "Hey, boy," Emma whispered, running to him. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. The therapist smiled. "Hello again, Rex." Officer Daniels leaned against the doorframe, watching quietly. "He dragged me here when I said your name," he said, grinning. Emma giggled, a sound bright and free. "Want to show him your picture?" the therapist asked. Emma nodded and handed over her crayon drawing, a girl and a dog beneath a shining sun. The dog wore a badge. "That's you," she told Rex. "You're still protecting me." Daniel swallowed. "That's beautiful, kiddo." Emma folded the picture and tucked it into Rex's harness pocket, once used for evidence, now carrying something far greater. The room grew still, filled with quiet breathing. The therapist spoke softly. "She only opens up when he's here. With anyone else, she still hides. But with Rex, she remembers without fear." Daniels nodded. "Yeah, he's always had that gift. But with her, it's something deeper." Emma brushed her hands through Rex's fur, whispering secrets only he could hear. "She tells him everything," the therapist murmured. "It's like he translates her pain into peace." Daniel's voice was low. "He's been doing that his whole life. Only now, it's healing her." Emma began reading aloud from a children's book, her small voice steady. Rex listened, eyes half-lidded, breathing in rhythm with her words. When she finished, she smiled. He liked it. Daniels chuckled. "He's a great listener." The therapist watched them, awe softening her tone. "He makes her feel safe again." Daniels looked at them both, the girl who had been lost and the dog who found her. "He doesn't just protect people," he said. "He restores them." Outside, leaves scattered like golden memories. Emma hugged Rex once more. "See you soon, hero." As Daniels opened the door, Rex turned back, tail wagging once before stepping into the fading light. "She's making progress," the therapist said. Daniels smiled. "She's got the best therapy partner in the world." Through the glass, Emma waved, her laughter echoing like sunlight. And for the first time in a long while, the air smelled not of pain, but of level-strong hope. The morning came slow and golden, the kind of morning that carried the quiet dignity of endings. The air outside the precinct was crisp, touched by the faint hum of autumn wind. A banner hung across the courtyard, honoring Officer Rex, K9 Unit, 8 years of service. People had gathered in small clusters, officers in uniform, families, neighbors, even journalists who remembered the trial that changed everything. The crowd was silent, respectful. The sound of flags rustling in the breeze was the only thing that dared to break the stillness. And there, sitting near the podium, was Rex. Older now. The streaks of gray around his muzzle gleamed in the sunlight like silver threads woven into gold. His once powerful frame had softened. The energy that used to ripple through him had become something slower, steadier, dignified. Yet, his eyes, those warm amber eyes, were the same, steady, watchful, wise. Beside him stood Officer Daniels, his uniform crisp, his expression a mixture of pride and sorrow. He rested a hand on the dog's shoulder, fingers brushing against the thick fur that had carried so much history, so much courage. In the front row sat Emma, now 10 years old, taller, stronger. The little girl who had once trembled behind court walls now sat with her back straight, a small medal glinting in her hand. Her eyes were red, but she smiled through it. That kind of smile that only love and gratitude could hold at the same time. The chief of police stepped forward, voice steady over the microphone. Today, we honor a partner, a protector, whose service went far beyond duty. Officer Rex has not only helped us bring justice to those who needed it, but he reminded us of something greater, that courage isn't always loud, and heroes aren't always human. The audience stirred, a few wiping their eyes discreetly. Daniels looked down at Rex, whispering softly, "That's you, old boy." Rex blinked slowly, tail wagging once, just once, as if in quiet acknowledgement. The chief continued, "There are moments in this job that stay with us. For many of us, that moment came when Rex stood beside a little girl in court and reminded us what loyalty truly means. It was more than a case. It was a lesson." He paused, turning toward Emma. "And I believe someone else here has something to say." A hush fell over the courtyard as Emma rose. She clutched the medal with both hands, walking carefully toward the podium. Rex lifted his head, his eyes following her every step. When she reached him, she knelt down, her small hands trembling slightly as she fastened the medal around his collar. The medal gleamed softly against his fur, catching the light in a way that made the whole scene feel almost cinematic, as though time itself had slowed to honor the moment. Her voice was soft, but clear enough that everyone could hear. "You didn't just protect me," she whispered. "You gave me my voice back." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a sound of shared emotion, too heavy to contain. Emma ran her fingers through Rex's fur, her tears finally spilling freely. "You were there when I was scared. You never left me. Even when I couldn't talk. You listened." Rex leaned forward, pressing his nose gently into her palm. She smiled through the tears, whispering, "You'll always be my hero." Rex's tail wagged once, slow, deliberate, before he gave a low, soft bark. Just one. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was warm. A sound of acknowledgement, of memory, of farewell. The crowd fell silent again. Daniels knelt beside them both, resting a hand on Emma's shoulder and the other on Rex's back. His voice was thick, but steady. "You did good, partner. Better than any of us ever could." The chief of police raised his hand to his brow in a calm, formal salute. The officers followed, a sea of uniforms standing in solemn respect. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds overhead. The light spilled across the courtyard, bathing them in a gentle glow. Emma looked up, her tears catching the light, sparkling like tiny fragments of the past, turning into hope. Daniels smiled faintly. "Looks like the universe just gave you a standing ovation, buddy." Rex blinked slowly, his breathing deep and calm. The sound of the flag flapping above them echoed like a heartbeat. Later, when the crowd began to disperse, Emma sat with Rex on the courthouse steps. The world moved quietly around them. Voices fading, footsteps distant. She stroked his fur, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can rest now. You've done enough." Rex rested his head on her lap, closing his eyes. The warmth of the sunlight pooled across his back, the same light that once fell on those same courthouse steps a year before, when truth had found its voice. Daniels watched from a few feet away, his hands in his pockets, his throat tight. He didn't interrupt. He didn't speak. He knew that some goodbyes didn't need words. They just needed presence. For a long time, Emma stayed there, the metal glinting softly on Rex's collar, her hand moving in slow, comforting circles through his fur. She looked out at the horizon, at the sky breaking open with light, and whispered, "Sometimes heroes wear badges. Sometimes they just have fur and a heartbeat that never lies. Sometimes stories like Rex and Emma's remind us that love doesn't always speak in words. Sometimes it's in the way a tail wags when you walk in the door, or how a loyal dog stays by your side even when the world feels too heavy." German shepherds, especially, seem to carry a kind of quiet nobility, a mix of courage and tenderness that shows us what true loyalty really means. If you've ever looked into your own dog's eyes and felt that bond, that silent understanding, you already know how powerful it is, and maybe after hearing this story, you'll want to deepen that connection even more. There's a wonderful resource I've found that helps people communicate better with their dogs, to strengthen that trust and companionship we all cherish. You can check it out whenever you'd like. No rush, no pressure. Because at the end of the day, what matters most isn't training or perfection. It's love, patience, and the quiet promise our dogs give us every day: "I'm here, always."